Yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
All right. All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. I am your Ward 2 City Councilor JT Scott, and happy to have you here at Warehouse 11. Also happy to have all the folks on at home. And so I'm going to hopefully have a very concise summary of some of the art zoning we currently have and some of the city's potential changes they're considering. So let me just get into it first by saying this is my informal zoning analysis. It's not a legal document. This is, you can find the official zoning on somervillezoning.com, or you can, if you're interested in Rafi's zoning petition, you can find that on the city council's website at somervillema.legistar.com. But this is me trying to break down what is an incredibly complicated thing in zoning and break it down to a point where we can have a meaningful conversation about it. So I do want to start off by thanking the folks here at Warehouse 11 for having us here. Peggy's an absolute rock star. This is an incredible space. I'm so glad to not be meeting in a police station, and they do incredible events here. So I highly recommend checking them out. They're an awesome resource in the neighborhood. I also want to thank the folks from Art Stays Here, who were instrumental in helping to publicize this meeting and helped pull together some materials, as well as, of course, Daniel Wong, who has been an incredible assistance. Many of you know him also from the Summer Nova meetings. And so Daniel will be our long-suffering tech assistant and admin on this, trying to make sure everything works for the hybrid part of this meeting. I also want to thank some of the folks I see here tonight from the neighborhood council, some familiar faces, and then a whole bunch of new faces. So hooray, I'm glad you're here. Now, before I get too far, I do want to give the folks from Art Stays Here a second to say hello. Amy's back, Amy's up here. And there's a ton of information back there on the table if you'd like to sign up for their mailing list or to find out more about them. But Ethan, you were going to say a few words for Art Stays Here?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Bennett. Thanks to JT and thanks to Daniel for having us here tonight. If you haven't heard about Art Stays Here, we're an arts advocacy, volunteer-run nonprofit, and our mission is to preserve the arts buildings that we have and to create more long-term. Because you may not know, they are at risk, and we've been losing up to $2 million, 2 million square foot of cultural space in our region over the past decades. We have some stuff on the table back here. You can sign up to get emails. You can learn about the projects that we work on. You can learn about our podcast. And I'm going to turn it over to Ethan. Thank you.
Hey everyone, Ethan Dussault, head engineer, co-operator, co-owner, New Alliance Audio, which is a recording studio just on the other side of Union Square down the road here. Is that?
Buildings.
Oh, and Milk Row Studio is right behind the historic Milk Row Cemetery. Fortunately, our studio has been displaced twice over the last 20 years. But let me tell you, I like it in Somerville and I want to stay. In my opinion, the FAB zone is the unsung hero of our city's zoning ordinance, as it offers many protections to the existing affordable art spaces in the city that many of us work in. I believe my studio would not be here if it weren't for the FAB zone. So I just really quick want to invite artists, craftspeople, musicians, and art supporters in the community to a meeting here at Warehouse 11 on February 12th from 7 to 9 p.m. hosted by Art Stays Here as part of our Don't F with FAB campaign. This will be about continuing the discussion about all the potential zoning changes in Somerville that could hugely impact artists, art spaces, and the creative sector. We will give attendees the opportunity to take part in on-site arts advocacy video testimonials, letter writing, social sharing, petition signing, and more. Please see the table to the back to sign up for our email list. And for those joining us online, please sign up at don'tfwithfab.org to make sure you're a part of this conversation going forward. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. So thank you guys. And again, a giant thanks as always to the Union Square Neighborhood Council, and I'll put up their contact information in just a second. But let's break into what are we actually talking about tonight. Well, first, I'm going to try to lay out what FAB zoning is, and you might actually live a lot closer to a FAB zone than you know. I'm going to spell out some of the changes that are being considered by the planning department to the FAB district, including the creation of a potential innovation district. And then just because I know there's so much overlap in what people care about, I'm going to try to give you a brief comparison of that with some of the details that are in Rafi's Summer Nova proposal. So I'm going to be moving fast. but there's going to be plenty of time for questions. So what is FAB zoning? Well, zoning in general is just how we decide what can get built in different places and what kind of uses can go in those buildings. So in 2019, the city council completed a citywide zoning overhaul for the first time in about 100 years. And as part of doing that, created different kind of districts, residential districts, mid-rise, high-rise, commercial, and other categories. But commercial is what we're really focusing on because there's 4 different kinds of commercial zoning, commercial core, commercial business. You might see that over a market basket or something like that, or industry might be some of the buildings back in brick bottom. But fabrication is, I think, as Ethan said, kind of the crown jewel of the zoning because it was created with the intention to protect existing old buildings. I've always said new businesses need old buildings, right? Artists need these old buildings. And so protecting the buildings that are assets to the creative economy of Somerville was exactly the reason why we're doing it. And most importantly, perhaps, to make sure that they are removed from the speculative real estate market that has people wanting to buy up buildings and turn them into condos. Anything that's in a fabrication district can't turn into condos. So that's the goal of the district. And what it does is it has different, it has some allowed building sizes. It can go up to 4 stories, which in the end works out to 85 feet of height, which is, for anybody curious, roughly the size of the Darth Vader looking building on the corner here, right across from Dunkin' Donuts. And you know, how much parking is required for it? Well, it depends on what the uses are inside there. I'm so sorry. Please don't try to read all 800 pages of zoning unless you really mean it to try to figure that out. But this is just kind of a rough estimate of different uses and what that would mean for parking. But one of the things that is really important that I want to point out here is the max floor plate. That's the footprint of the building. It can't be any bigger than 30,000 square feet in a FAB district. So the uses in it are perhaps the most important, right? Because right there at the top, it's these art and creative enterprises uses. And we're going to talk about a little bit more about what those are. But also you could put a community center into a FAB district. You could put some commercial services, not a ton. If you want to do light industrial, you know, artisanal manufacturing of your chocolate or of your hand roasted coffee beans. It's all these kind of innovative and creative uses that can go in a FAB district. But like I said, especially not housing. Now, one thing that's also true is that in the FAB district, any building in there has to reserve at least 5% of the floor area for arts and creative enterprise uses. Right. So if somebody wanted to build a new one that had a factory in it, at least 5% of it would have to be set aside for something that would fit in those ACE uses, like artist studios or you know, a gallery space. So what is currently in the arts and creative enterprise uses? Well, I want to talk about it for a second because changing some of that is what's being contemplated. So like I said, artisanal production, art sales and services, but then some things that maybe don't sound quite like arts and creative enterprises, like co-working. I don't think of WeWork or Work Bar as an arts or creative use. You know, there's also a shared workspaces, arts education category, something called design services, which always kind of comes across my nose, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then the option to have these work-live creative studios by special permit. But interestingly enough, literally nobody in the city has ever done that since 2019 when the FAB zoning popped up. And I think there's been a lot of ambiguity around what that is. So now that we know what FAB is, how might FAB change? And this is what I want to lay out for you guys so that I can get your feedback on it tonight and in the weeks to come. Well, we're going to be, one part of it is potentially revising the arts and creative economy and office uses here. So some of the proposed changes, it says mayor's proposed, it's not the mayor's proposed, it's the planning department is considering this. And what it does is it redefines what artisanal production is, kind of refines that definition some, pulls out those co-working spaces, defines them very clearly and parks them somewhere else, creates new categories for arts education, business incubator, just basically cleaning up the definitions. And then applying those definitions to the FAB district in a way that protects those buildings truly for arts and creative economy uses. I see Director Jenkins back here in the back, and I know that Director Jenkins, the Art Council, have been a huge part of this conversation to try to tighten up these definitions. Also, before I get too far, I want to thank Director Lewis and Mr. Grominski from the city's Planning and Zoning Department who are here tonight to help explain some of this and also to answer questions. So this is kind of the master chart, right? And I know this doesn't look readable for anybody who doesn't spend a lot of time sitting in a zoning document. But what I want to point out here is up at the top, that arts and creative enterprise category, that light blue FAB column there is showing that we're really tightening up the definition on all these categories: art shared workspaces, arts education, and making sure those are always going to be allowed in FAB district. But those categories for business incubator or co-working are actually being removed, so that existing FAB buildings that you might have an artist studio in today won't be the target for the next WeWork or crypto shared workspace 3.0. I don't know, some terrible buzzword. So also wanted to point out that there is an effort here to try to refine down the definition of artist housing, but for the moment that would not be going into FAB. And I think there's some considerations they want to talk. So before I move off this chart, because I know it's a lot to digest, I wanted to invite Andrew Graminsky from the planning department, who's been working on a lot of these definitions, to just take a couple minutes and talk about maybe some of the nuance of what these things are and why they're going in those categories.
Thank you, Councilor. Hi, everyone. Andrew Graminsky, planner with Planning, Preservation, Zoning. I've been involved with some of the refinements to the zoning, specifically with the ACE use categories and the tangential sort of effects that it has. That being more specifically, right now, as Councilor Scott said, it's shared workspaces and arts education. And we decided to separate that out. And part of that is that there was a study that was conducted by the Arts Council back in 2021, I believe, that was created by the MAPC. It was called the Arts Space Risk Assessment. And that assessment analyzed the impacts of development pressure on artist spaces in Somerville. Some of those recommendations were zoning related. And out of that came these specific amendments that we're discussing tonight. So I just wanted to make sure we make clear where that came from. Arts education is now its own piece, and it's doesn't include secondary education organizations. It's just specifically more just arts-based education uses. And then arts shared workspaces, we added the word art there to make sure that we clearly define what those shared workspaces are. And as Councilor Scott said, we pull out those more business incubator office related uses and co-working into the office use categories. So they're no longer permitted in the fabrication zoning district. And then artist housing is really removing the existing work live use within the ACE space. And instead we're making it an actual like dwelling unit in our zoning, think of it just like a dwelling unit, but with the created units attached. And then we're creating an actual artist housing land use within the residential use categories. And that will be allowed by, it should say special permit, because we want to make sure that there's considerations if these units are going in buildings with regular dwelling units. For example, if there's going to be clients walking around the building, we want to make sure that there's special considerations to address that. So that's really the gist of these specific amendments. But myself and Director Lewis, Director Jenkins are here to also answer any questions and comments you have later. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Graminsky. I just want to apologize to anybody who has been waiting to get in. Daniel got booted and then is no longer the admin, so now I'm everything. So we'll get you in here as fast as we can. But just moving on from this, I did want to point out one thing in particular. This design services category is one of these things that I think still does need a little bit of work. Now, these are great changes that by and large, again, have been worked on from the Arts Council with planning and zoning. But this is one that continues to bother me a little bit, and I'm not sure what the right answer is. Right. So the design services category, you can see the definition there: landscape architecture, graphic design, interior design. I'm sure some of you people are in these businesses, but then it's got software development. And for me, I'm not sure that I want EA Sports buying an artist building and putting their factory software shop in, right? Or Google, for example. So I do think there's still some work there to narrow that down, to tighten that up. Maybe I'm the only one who thinks that way, but it's all of these different considerations, all these different changes that are being considered by the planning and zoning department are in various stages of being fully baked. So I just want to emphasize that none of this is actually even in a proposal before the city council yet. This is all being shared thanks to Director Galagani, Director Lewis, and folks in planning and zoning being willing to share these ideas these concepts with me so that I can come and share them with you, because they recognize that nobody in the city cares more about zoning than Ward 2 does, because nobody in the city has had zoning land on them quite as hard in the last 12 years, especially 2012 to 2017. If you know, you know. But you know, this is also where FAB lives in Somerville. No place in Somerville has more FAB than Ward 2. So it's, you know, incredibly important for me to make sure that we protect it and to make sure that we get changes right so that it does what we want it to do and that we preserve those benefits. So how else might FAB change? Well, this is part 2, and I got to tell you, it's a lot less fully baked than those changes we were just talking about with the Arts Council. And that is in the creation of an innovation zoning district that would supplant some of the existing FAB. So what is that? Well, right here on the screen, you've got these blue parcels. Those are the FAB districts. And if you're part of this neighborhood, you recognize it, right? There's the whole Summer Nova complex, the Aeronaut Brewing, Brooklyn Boulders. There's the circus school across the train tracks there. There's some industrial buildings down towards Forge Bakery. You might recognize the Bornstein flooring factory on the other side of the train tracks, or the metal stamping plant right over off to the side of Market Basket. These are all buildings that have either traditionally housed arts and creative uses or industrial uses that are part of the fabrication district today. Now, those gray checkered areas are ones that are just being considered possibly for removal from that FAB district and instead conversion into something called an innovation district. And so this would be the only parcels in the city that would change this under this initial idea. But the creation of a new innovation district implies that you could end up putting it in other places. So what would it do? Well, it would add a 5th category to that commercial zoning. So in addition to fabrication, commercial core, commercial industry, you'd have this innovation district. And the purpose, according to the drafts I've seen, again, this is all very early drafts, would be to provide commercial spaces, light and moderate industry, science-based innovation economy. So really a different purpose than what fabrication is there for. So what would it be? Well, what doesn't change in the proposals I've seen have been the form factors, right? It would still just be a 4-story, 85-foot type of district. That's the kind of building you could build there. Think about, you know, Manchester, New Hampshire style, old classic industrial buildings. The parking load, again, it depends. It looks like it would be a little bit higher in these categories, but that really depends on what would end up going into the building. And importantly, the floor plate size, which is being hidden by the fact that I am talking, would still stay at 30,000 square feet. So the permitted uses in that innovation district would have a ton of overlap with what's currently allowed in FAB. Basically, everything that's allowed in FAB right now would still be allowed, but it would expand some of the different purposes that you could use it for. And I think I've got a chart right here. Yeah, there you go. So that business incubator category that Mr. Graminsky talked about, the co-working spaces, those would now be parked in the innovation district and removed from FAB, right? So that would, again, be protective of FAB, but you also see scientific R&D, medical diagnostic laboratory, testing laboratory. That would be kind of the city's thinking and intention for the buildings that would be mapped into this kind of innovation district. So notable, it would still prevent housing from being in there, medical offices, dental offices, general office, biomedical. So it still wouldn't be open to the largest speculative market of residential, but certainly would open it up to some other science-based economy stuff. Just like FAB, the draft that I've seen would still reserve 5% of the floor space for those arts and creative enterprise uses. But when I'm looking at buildings that are already full of artists, you know, it's a net loss if we have a building that's full of artist studios and then only replaces it with 5% of a building, you know, down on the corner ground floor. So that said, just a quick recap. So this would contemplate removing some of the FAB land, replacing it with that innovation district, and which would have much in common with the current FAB, except it would be less protective of artist uses and really would be trying to court those technology uses. Again, sure, Director Lewis would like to add, because if I got it wrong, Director.
No, you didn't get it wrong at all.
Oh,
Um,
for once?
no, one of the things I wanted to explain is the reason the innovation concept came about is when we, all of us, lost Artist Asylum out of the Sumanova, the Ames Envelope Complex, and realized that what was happening was the threat that was happening to these FAB uses. We wanted to make sure that that didn't happen elsewhere. Now, at the same time, when we've got the companies that are in the Ames Envelope Complex, in Greentown Labs, this is all tough tech, clean tech, sort of cutting edge stuff, but from a different side of the creative world. And so we wanted to give an opportunity to explore as to where those innovation uses could potentially go, but without threatening the existing artist space. And so that's why sort of and as Councilor Scott said, this is really, really early in the process. But I just wanted to let you know that was sort of like the impetus, so that we can make sure that we make these changes so that something like this doesn't happen again in other FAB buildings. So that was does that make sense?
Yeah, that is the hope and intention. I appreciate that context. So let's see, I'm gonna let somebody in since I'm looking at it. All right. So so that's kind of the shape of it, and it's in just by necessity, because it's an early draft. It's something that planning and zoning has been working about, thinking about, and is just sharing us as I get to hear about it with y'all. And then we get to have a conversation about, well, that sounds fishy, or that sounds great, or I would really like this better if, and so because the pen is still in everybody's hand here, right? This is not an ink dry kind of situation. So how does all this compare with Rafi's Summer Nova proposal? And I'm not going to dive into a ton of detail here, because the Summer Nova proposal is how many pages? Is it 500 pages? No, it can't be 500 pages. It's a lot. All right, so for those of you who maybe aren't familiar, the Aeronaut Brewing Building, or the Ames Envelope Factory, all those properties back there were bought in 2018 by Rafi Properties. And just last month, they came forward with a zoning proposal that they have submitted to the city for consideration, submitted to the city council. And it's a zoning overlay on Summer Nova. Well, what the heck is a zoning overlay? Well, it's just like zoning, except it sits on top of the zoning that's already there. It's an optional zoning that you can gain access to if you jump through certain hoops, and it can basically overwrite the base zoning in a district. So if it was already FAB, but then there's this overlay on top, they decide to take advantage of, now they've got something in this overlay district. So they've called it their climate and equity overlay, and it would cover slightly more land than the first draft of the innovation district, but actually pretty similar. So you can see those check mark boxes, including that one industrial building down at Kent Street, close to Forge, are one of the things, are those the buildings that the city had been considering putting in an innovation district. And that red area that's got the dashed line around it is the area that I believe is covered by Rafi's Summer Nova proposal. So it lines up pretty close, although there's a few little details different. And so what is the intent of that climate and equity innovation sub area? Oh my God, that's a mouthful. The Summer Nova proposal basically is real straightforward. They want to redevelop their factory campus and advance climate tech. They've got buildings they'd like to build, and some big plans for the area. So it does propose different permitted uses than what the innovation district drafts that I've seen would. Again, there's a lot of overlap, but you can see food and beverage is in there, right? They've already got Aeronaut, which makes sense. They'd like to have Aeronaut still in whatever their new buildings are. It's got more R&D and lab uses there. It also has particularly residential, which is an important difference that they put in actually in response to some of the community feedback on some of their early versions of their draft. and general office by special permit. So I'm not going to get too far into the weeds of this again, but it also proposes different dimensional minimums than the city's innovation district. Remember, I said the FAB and the innovation district in terms of how big you can build are exactly the same. Well, Rafi's proposal is a little bit different. They can do 4 different types of buildings, and I don't have them all broken out here, but roughly you can see that instead of 4 stories, we're talking about 15, 17 stories, right? Instead of a max floor plate of 30K, some of the buildings could go up to 55K. They feel like that's important for the kind of businesses that they want to target for, the kind of buildings they want to build. And then in parking, instead of these odd calculations based on thousands of square feet build out and the ratio of the use, they've just got it capped as a minimum and maximum for the entire area of all their buildings that they'd be contemplating. So I just put that up there so you can understand what some of the big structural differences would be. This is an eye chart. I know, please don't freak out. My font setting, as you can see, graphic design is my passion. But this basically breaks out the FAB as it currently exists, the new FAB proposal consideration draft, the innovation district draft, and the Rafi proposal, and what some of the differences are in terms of what kind of uses could be in there. There's also a really important piece here, which is that second line, and I'll make that a little bit bigger here, because this shows some of the dimensional changes in those different differences in those different proposals. But I want to point out that FAB, as it stands, is the law. It's the zoning. It's what we have. It's what we've had since 2019. Any of these changes to FAB right now are just drafts that the planning department is considering that haven't even come to the city council. Same thing for the innovation district. And the Rafi proposal is an official proposal to the city council, but right now it's been referred to land use, and I will count on my colleagues there to schedule the public hearings and have consideration. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that anytime you want to change zoning, it has to come to the city council, and we have to hold a public hearing with the planning board to consider what those amendments are. So if it's from Rafi, we have to have a public hearing, talk about it, and then decide what we want to do, if anything, about that. Same thing, if the planning department decides they've got their stuff baked to the point and they get the mayor to sign off on it, then it would come to the city council as a request to the mayor to amend zoning. But no matter what, making any change to zoning requires 8 votes of the city council. I am one of those 11 votes. So it's a pretty high bar to cross. So that's hopefully enough of an overview to have a useful conversation. I am sorry, I know I went 1,000 miles an hour, but I really do want to get to the part of the conversation where I get to hear from you. So if you're in person, we've got a microphone right up here. The camera is on it, so people at home will be able to see us. So if you'd like to, I'm going to ask people this time to try to step up to the microphone so folks at home can hear a little bit clearer than the last time I tried to do a hybrid meeting. I'm still working on it. And then if you're at home online, I'm going to ask you to please use the raise hand feature there and use that raise hand feature. And hopefully I can get Daniel here set as the administrator so he can be handling unmuting everybody. Daniel, boy, I sure hope I can do this. All right. So if you just give me a moment here to try to make this work. You got booted again. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I tell you what, let's start with some of the people in the room while Daniel tries to get back into it. Are there any thoughts, comments, questions? Anybody? Nobody. We all get to go home? Okay, all right, all right. Wiley, you're up first, and then we'll go to you. Why don't you come on up? Say hi to the folks at home.
Where do you want me to stand?
Right here with this microphone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Wiley.
a better term, are there different percentages that are specifically for those arts uses instead of the ACE category? So we're getting to some of that as we're refining these definitions. And so, sort of it's still a bit of a moving target, but I love that you said that because we have had those conversations internally. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Director. Please, step on up.
I woke up and I read this morning, and for the first time since it was announced, I felt a little bit relaxed, and that was bad. I don't want to feel too comfortable around this, but the fact that they're discussing having a limit of 4 stories, which might grow a little bit, is a relief, because that was a monstrosity that was presented to us in terms of its misfit for that space. I also think I was at a meeting where some people thought that residential use would be a good idea. I'm not one of them, and a number of other people didn't think so as well. I still don't think it's a good idea. It's good for the artists, and I like that. And the FAB allocation that was meant for the artists should stand as it is. People who wanted residential felt that it would bring more life to the area after dark. I don't think that's true. I think it makes it residential in a suburban way. It quiets things down rather than livens them up. Just look at the life of the building across the street from Bow Street Market. Thank you for making a presentation in which people were heard. You lowered the buildings substantially, and you questioned the idea about residential housing. Thanks.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm not going to take credit for it. I'm not going to take credit for it because this isn't my proposal. This is the stuff that the planning department's been thinking about. But it just goes to show there's so many different thoughts of what's a recognition that there are many possible paths forward is maybe the best part of all this.
Councilor Wilson's trying to get in. Oh, got him.
Nope, we got him. Councilor Wilson is here. Oh my gosh, a second representative of the legislative body. All right, you didn't see anybody else from city council come in, did you, Daniel? To be honest, Daniel's been kicked out of the meeting several times. All right, so let's see here. I see Polly's got her hand raised. Polly, it's so good to see a brick bottom person down here. Daniel, would you try to unmute her?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you, Polly.
Woo! If you can see me, I'm in my pajamas.
No.
So a fast question on the form factor. One of the key form requirements on the FAB district in the base proposal is a big setback. It's 25 feet, I believe, including the sidewalk. Is that going to continue under the new proposal? And also, will it continue in the innovation?
You know, so right now, and I mean, Mr. Gurminski can probably say it better than I can. I don't think the dimensional standards are changing at all in these proposals, but Mr. Gurminski, maybe you can.
That is correct. The dimensional standards are going to remain exactly as is.
Yeah, so that they're not looking to change anything in the dimension.
City's proposal.
City's.
Yeah. Rafi's proposal is a totally different kettle of fish. Kettle of fish, is that the word I'm looking for? But at least any consideration from the planning department right now with this innovation or updating FAB uses wouldn't change the dimensional standards at all.
And just to verify what you said, right now, the city's only looking at changing the FAB to some of these innovation districts in the areas you showed, not where the other FABs are, like in Brick Bottom.
You know, so you really struck to the heart of one of my first questions about this, which is if there's going to be an innovation district, where is it going to be in the first rollout, but also in the future, right? If there is such a district, it makes it easier to flip over buildings that are now FAB into innovation in the future. So I think that's something that, at least for me, I want to be cautious of and cognizant of. But yeah, right now, the only map I've ever seen were the ones I just showed you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks you, Polly. Let's see here. Martha, and then I'm going to come back to the room here. Yeah, I get you. And I see 2 people in the room right here. So Martha, you're up. And then And then we'll go to some more folks in the room. All right, Martha, you there? No dice?
Can you
Nope.
hear me? Can you hear me?
Martha? Yeah.
Hi, I'm not Martha, as you probably can see if my face is showing. Martha's my wife. We live across the street from, across the train tracks from that area. I'm just trying to understand. So the innovation district and I don't know the whole name for it, the thing that Rafi is presenting, those are two different proposals. Is that right? Am I understanding that right?
That's right. That's right. Oh my gosh. There's an echo here. But that's right. So Summer Nova, something that has come from property owner and the other use category changes come out of the planning department.
Tell them you should move there.
Yeah, we'll get there. All right, does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does answer my question. I guess the only other one I have just real quick is what, because that's the piece I'm confused on. Where are each of those negotiated? Like, where's the form in which you say, you know, okay, I like that, but don't like this, change this, but don't do that. I feel like I'm attending these meetings, but I don't know where the negotiation happens to say, you can include these 10 things and not these 5.
Sure. Can I get an echo off you when I answer that? All right, awesome. So that's an excellent question. And the answer is it starts in rooms like this one. So especially when it comes to the city's proposals from the planning department, these folks don't work for me. They're part of the executive branch, but they do work for all of us in the city. And so having an opportunity like this where you can say, you know what, I think that part of the idea stinks or is great, or I wish it just had something a little bit different. This is the perfect opportunity for folks in this room to talk to the people who are actually drafting up those things. I also see some of the folks from Summer Nova are here tonight too. And the meetings, I've held several neighborhood meetings in conjunction with the neighborhood council in Summer Nova. And really a lot of the negotiation there both happens in what they hear in these meetings, but also in the work that the neighborhood council is doing right now. And I believe, Bill, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I believe there's some active steps moving towards negotiating on the proposal and the community benefits agreement. Before I go, actually, you know what? I'm gonna just advance this to the next slide to give you a place. Here's some different ways to stay involved. Now, there's lots of different ways to negotiate. I think the earlier you get involved in those conversations, the better, which is why I'm glad to be able to share some of these drafts with you tonight. But if you want to, like I said, get involved with Art Stays Here, there's our contact information, the Union Square Neighborhood Council. I cannot tell you how critical they are in negotiating all these things. And I believe that bit.ly negotiate with Summer Nova is a link that's open for another couple days for applying to a negotiating committee. Is that right, Bill?
So Sunday, January 21st, applications can be filled out online, to be part of the negotiating team that will be negotiating CBA with Rafi Properties for the Summer Nova site. That selection process, there'll be interviews on the 22nd, Monday the 22nd, for those that submit their applications by the 21st. And then the board itself will vote on who's on the negotiating team from those applications submitted.
All right.
And there will be a 7-person negotiating team.
All right. So that's just to make sure you heard it here, because the microphone might not have picked that up. The neighborhood council is convening a 7-member negotiating committee to work very directly on community benefits and basically all pieces of that Rafi proposal. But those negotiations also happen at the city council level with the land use committee, right? With the public hearing, there's gonna be a public hearing where everybody gets their chance to get up and give their 2 minutes. The land use committee deliberates on it for months sometimes, and then either does something about it or doesn't. So there's a lot of room, but your best time to get involved is as early as possible. And so that's what we're doing here. Oh, one more link. What's the one more link?
One more link. So the part that of what you've heard this evening that is very well refined that we've been working with the Arts Council on heavily is the first step of redefining changing the definitions and the use categories. So that can be found on the Summer Voice page, which is voice.somerville MA.
It's just Summer Voice. Back up. Let's see.
You send it out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
we'll put something
We'll
online for
definitely
it.
sound it out. But
Yeah.
but the sort of the, what Councilor Scott showed of the use chart, that's all out there on the Summer Voice page. So that is, easy to reference and gives you more time to look at
We
it.
had a public hearing about that in the fall as well.
Yes,
That was-
we,
All right, Arts Council wants us all to know they had a public hearing about that in the fall as well, one of those citywide meetings. All right, so I want to come back and we were going to go to folks in the room here. Yes, please, you and then Mr. Braun over there, come on up. Make sure folks at home can see you and hear you.
Hello, Dan Coughlin, Union Square resident over at Joy Street Studios as well. I had a couple of questions for planning department. First question is, why would the design services, all those uses not just be considered office space? Architect's office, landscape offices, those all seem like they could just be in typical office space uses. And then my second question is under current zoning, does the innovation district, would that be allowed in the other commercial zones? So commercial core, commercial industrial, commercial business. Why is it being taken out of FAB when it seems like that's perfect for what those other commercial uses are for, those science techie type buildings? Because that's what those are already kind of for, right?
yeah. Thank you for those questions. So some of these, and this is where it sort of gets nuanced and difficult. So an architect's office, for example, can be one person with their laptop, or it could be Stantec, sort of the giant engineering firm. So if it's depending on how big the firm is, it sort of gets difficult to navigate, but it is still a creative enterprise. I'm taking notes. I think that's a good observation. Just like we've been talking with Councilor Scott about the tech uses, sort of what does that mean? Some of this also goes to how we can then enforce some of these issues. So for example, inspection services would have to go out and look at these. So we need to work with ISD on some of these definitions as well as we dig into them a bit more. The only reason that we've been looking at the current location, the Ames envelope factory, and nowhere else in the city for innovation was just the almost a making what's happening there with Greentown Labs more isolated, sort of I think a lot of those uses can happen in other commercial districts. A lot of them can happen anywhere, sort of they all have, any new building has some requirement for A space if they're a commercial building of some description. A mid-rise, a high-rise, they all have those ACE requirements. So what we don't know yet is in those, how much of that, sort of similar to what I had said to the gentleman over here, how much of that might be ACE uses versus innovation uses. And it's hard to,
How much?
right, how much, so if there's a set aside for a space. Of that a space, how much is arts, how much is innovation? So we don't know that yet. But we can, sort of,
So you're taking the innovation out of the ACE. It's not just out of the FAB. You're taking it out of the 5% ACE set aside. Is that what you're saying?
there's a difference between, so the FAB is a district.
Yep.
And it can have, sort of,
Yep.
it has a list of uses.
Yep.
It's one of those things that could happen that FAB gets protected. There is no more innovation other than the one thing that we're looking at now, if it happens. But then, do we want to encourage those uses elsewhere? For example, in a, I'm gonna pick on the building in Boynton Yards. So that building had to have a certain amount of A space based on its square footage. I don't know where the space is in that building, but a lot of times it's not necessarily in the prime locations. So, that's the Taza building, is 561 Windsor. No, I'm talking about the new one. Yeah, but they still have to have some space in the new buildings as well. One of the things that we have been talking about a lot is how much symbiosis amongst studios do artists need. If there's a square feet of a space, say, that's one studio potentially. Does that artist want to be by themselves in that space, or do they work better in a collaborative environment? So those are things that we're sort of working through, and the answer is, sort of usually yes, otherwise there wouldn't be studios. But could that 700 square feet be, 4 guys and laptops developing the next computer game? I don't know. So I know that sort of, it's sort of there's so much that's in motion right now. But and that's why I'm trying to relate some of the conversations that we've had, because we just don't know yet.
So you could just leave the FAB alone and then just put innovation with within these other uses, because they already work within those other uses. And then all of these questions kind of.
Oh, Andrew wants to add something.
What's your name again, sir, by the way?
Dan Coughlin.
Thank you for the comment, Stan. So some of the existing uses in what we consider Summer Nova, with these proposed FAB changes, wouldn't fit into those use categories, like Form Labs, Greentown Labs. They would become a gray area from an interpretation standpoint. They could exist if these the proposal move forward, but they cannot expand in any way. But they could move on to another location, for example. They couldn't expand. Form Labs, for example, wants more space. And if things remained as is, they couldn't do that, and they would probably leave Somerville. So we just want to recognize that we want to make sure that they have an opportunity within bounds, of course, and also understanding that we don't want to lose more FAB in the city. But if we move forward with these changes, they would become non-conforming. And then that's how they would exist moving forward. They could remain, they just couldn't go, they couldn't expand it.
So you're doing this so that private company won't leave the city with some of them.
Not exactly. We just want to make sure that they have a place in the city's economy.
Okay.
Does that help
That's a
answer
good
your
way of
question?
putting it.
I mean, not really, but.
Okay.
Thanks for trying.
Sure.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Chris, you're up. Come on up.
Hey, everybody, I'm Chris Dwan. I'm a big civics nerd, and I've read all of these things, and I've thought way too much about these various proposals. I was not expecting to spend early 2024 thinking about zoning again. One of the documents that comes up over and over and over in these conversations is our supposed master plan, our summer vision, which I have problems with. It can be used to justify anything. It is so vague. But both in the 2010 version and in the rework in 2020-ish, there is a map on or about page 12 that shows Somerville divvied up into 3 categories. There is transform, there is enhance, and there is preserve. Transform is the 45 acres of Assembly Row. It is the 20 acres of Union Square redevelopment. It is, I don't know how big Boynton Yards is. It's all near the highway. It's all near the new transit. That is transform, something different, knock it down. Enhance is along our major thoroughfares where we want to put more height for mixed use residential. We were limited to like 2-3 stories. We popped it up to 4-5-6. That's where we had residential density. In this simple, it's one of the only clear things in Summer Vision is this map. Everything else you can say, well, but it's green, or it's arts, or it's what on this map, we said we were gonna bulldoze Union Square. We were gonna bulldoze Assembly Row. We're gonna bulldoze Boynton Yards. That's gone, that's transformed. I just looked at the map. I live on Ivaloo Street, which is next to Park Street. This is in a FAB. The Summer Nova campus is in a preserve area. And what Councilor Scott said just at the beginning of this was that FAB was an attempt to write into law, preserve it. You can't build old and cheap. When you make new, it will be expensive. When you bulldoze, those people will be displaced, they will move on. And what I'm hearing from putting Innovation District on the Summer Nova campus is that it is an attempt to put that back into the competitive economy so that we can bulldoze it and put something else there. And we're hoping to get some benefit around the edges. And unless we as a city choose to change that plan, and I really am frustrated with Summer Vision, it is so vague, you can do anything with it. But I do think it would be worth a citywide conversation about whether we want to stretch, transform away from the highways, away from the mass transit, and take something that we had decided to preserve and instead transform it. Thank you.
All right, let's see. I don't see anybody else with a hand raised at home. Do you see anybody there, Daniel? I like trying to bounce back and forth. All right, I don't see anybody, so why don't you come on up? Come on up. Mr. Parker, right?
Yes.
Oh, look at that.
Very good. Do I stand here?
Yeah, well, just talk into the microphone.
Hi.
Folks here at home can see you. Kind of.
This will be short. I did have one little question.
Sure.
I'm Jeffrey Parker. I've been attending a lot of meetings related to these developments over the last 2.5 months. And I've seen people in shock, appalled, unable to sleep at the notion of 14 and 16 floor buildings coming up. And then I'm delighted to see proposals which have 4-floor construction. But I want to ask, because I was a bit unclear in this, we're looking at change the discussions, the innovation proposal is to change the base zoning. It wouldn't prevent an overlay on top of that, of those 14 floors that are causing people to lose sleep.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Because again, zoning is complicated. So the innovation district changes would be changes to the base zoning, and it wouldn't prevent an overlay district from later being passed or laying on top of that. If you look at the base zoning for Union Square, it doesn't look like the high rise that we've got there, right? That sits in this very special overlay that was created for that particular project. So yeah, you're right. These things can also still coexist. They could still exist at the same time, but all of it requires 8 votes of the city council. And that's why we're having the meetings.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. Three people online have hands raised. Okay, I tell you what, I'm gonna go to those because we did 3 here local, and then I'll come to you in the back. So fire up whoever you want to fire up. You're in charge of who gets to go first.
I guess I've been unmuted. I don't know if that means I'm going, but my question, I think, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got.
Sorry, my question is in reference I guess to the comments about the planning documents that exist in Somerville, the recent changes to those documents in 2019 and 2020. And I'm curious about this proposed innovation zone. I guess we've heard one story about it emerging in conversation with the Arts Council, but then there seems to be also an alternative possible explanation that it's in response to the existing uses on the Summer Nova property and wanting to allow those businesses to remain and expand. So I guess I'm just curious about this innovation proposal, and was this like responsible, careful, thoughtful city planning, looking at the whole city as a whole, and all of our recent agreed upon planning documents, or was this in response to what Rafi Properties wants to do on the Summer Nova property? I know this proposed change would be much smaller, but it is basically making existing uses in that space legal. So I would just love to hear a little bit more background about how this came to be and whether it was reactionary or like careful and thought out.
All right, I think that's a great question. I think it's a question I cannot possibly answer, but I see two directors and a member of planning and zoning here, so I'm gonna let them figure out which one of them wants to try to answer that.
I mean,
Thank you for the question. It did come from a place of us trying to understand what are the uses in the city right now and how we can, just like we want to protect and enhance the artists, sort of expand and enhance the clean tech, tough tech, those types of uses that are already here in the likes of Greentown Labs. So it came from that point, almost an economic development standpoint, as we were talking about it. It does get to be, sort of anytime you're looking at zoning, because it is citywide, it gets to be quite complicated. And so that's why it tends to move slowly, because we do have to consider things that might be inadvertent conflicts or create things that we didn't foresee. So the fact that we're making these changes now to the arts uses is something that we learned after the fact of when the zoning was originally written. And so we're trying to make those corrections as we go. So that's why it's sort of based on the fabrication zoning, the innovation that we've been talking about so far, is based on the fabrication, because it was more about the use changes that we were wrestling with, rather than the actual mapping of a district per se. So therein lies, sort of some of the things that we do struggle with. And it might be that, it's not a district, maybe to, sort of to Dan's point, the question that he brought up earlier is perhaps it's a set of uses that's permitted in other zones. So we'll just have to, that's why these conversations are so helpful to us, because there are so many permutations. Did that answer your question? She's been muted. Okay. Hopefully that got to the question. Did I miss a part of that? Or did I cover it all?
I'm gonna go with you got it until I'm told otherwise. All right, so let's see, you said John and then Michael, is that? All right, so John Link, you're gonna get unmuted and you'll be up.
Yeah, thanks. I guess just I've got a lot of different thoughts on this, but I'll just say that maybe the top three on my mind. One is I have to agree with the other people. As someone in software development, I absolutely do not think software development belongs in arts space or considered as part of art space. I think that we need to protect that space for people that are actually, there's creative and then there's art, and there is a difference between the two. Secondly, I just want to say I really hope that we're strongly going to push back on the parking maximum in the proposal for the overlay. It does seem like maybe this idea of like trying to do two different zoning things at the same time is going to be confusing to I think everybody, because we've got both an overlay which will override everything that's in this proposal in the same space. And then I guess that's actually it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, John. You are 100% correct, especially on that last part. The fact that there are so many of these moving pieces, and they're moving from some from planning departments, some from property owners. Yeah, boy, I wish I could have simpler meetings, but thank you for hanging in with this one. Let's see here, Michael, and then Courtney, and then I'll come back to the room and get you. Yeah, all right, awesome. So, Michael.
Hello, my name is Michael. I live on Village Street for the last 10 years. I also have started now my second company that's been out of Greentown, and also worked in Rafi Properties for the last 10 years. I have a few concerns with related to the way that Rafi Properties is saying that this is an innovation and climate property area. Both of my startups are climate tech, and I feel like this is kind of a way to just change the zoning so that any company that has any sort of connection to climate change can come in and get premium office space basically there. And so I'd like to see something more around how do you actually ensure that there are climate tech, green tech companies that are allowed to go in this space if we're willing to change the zoning entirely for this, not just innovation, because I feel like that's basically every company is going to say that they're innovative. The other thing that I don't fully understand here is why, Form Energy, I work next to them all the time. They're $1 billion unicorn. They are, one of the great companies here that like has reached $1 billion valuation. They're not a small startup trying to tackle climate change. That type of a company is going to outgrow space very quickly and need to move into they have multiple offices, but they're growing so fast that I don't think that that's the standard that we should try and be having around. We should have dozens and dozens of small climate tech companies trying to come up with solutions instead of trying to cater to one extremely large $500 million funded company. So that we just have more local startup efforts. So yeah, those are my comments. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, boy, I don't think I can say it enough how much I appreciate hearing all these different ideas, especially from folks who are in the sector and in the neighborhood. All right, so I'm gonna hit Courtney, and then I'm gonna go to some more folks who are here in the room. Courtney, and then we'll go back to raised hands. So Courtney, you're up.
Hi, this is Courtney Kirk. I'm a Somerville resident. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm an abutter to Rafi Properties, and just in having this conversation about changes to zoning, there's a part of my mind that doesn't understand why, or maybe, I don't know, like why can't we think about some of the artist spaces very similar to how we think about affordable housing? What I hear from people is that there seems to be a clear distinction between a company like Google and that has lots of venture capitalist funding, all this sort of thing, versus like a singular artist who probably might be barely getting the bills paid. I don't know. Maybe they have some great clients that, they're really, really making it work. But when I think about people that need workspace, I think that you can't ignore sort of the dollar value to what a person might pay for a studio space versus a larger company. And I think it might be advantageous to also think about the economics of these businesses and sort of like a small business district overlay, that there's probably a financial component that could be brought to the conversation that might build in, affordability for artists versus, Form Energy that has endless money. So I think the finance side of things needs to be brought to the conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Courtney. And what I will say there is, I don't think you're wrong, but I also think that that busts up against one of the big barriers of what we can legally do with zoning. Right, the very first slide tonight was talking about, what is FAB zoning, what is zoning doing, and it is talking about what kind of buildings we can build or property owners can build in there, and what kind of businesses and uses can be in it. But tying it to specific financial gating factors isn't something that you can write into zoning. And that's where the work of folks like the neighborhood council is so critically important, because if we are going to create guaranteed affordable spaces for startup or guaranteed affordable spaces for artists, it has to be done through those kind of private negotiated agreements, or like I just heard about tonight, the Pearl Street Artist Building. Just sold, the owner of it sold the building to all of the existing tenants of it to guarantee that they're going to be there forever. Right. So I love things that we can do from a structural perspective, like the FAB district, that encourage those kinds of arrangements that keep artists in Somerville and create affordable artist spaces, that encourage, that provide leverage to organizations like the neighborhood council who are trying to work with these community benefits agreements. But yeah, unfortunately, it eventually comes down to, there are some things they don't let me write laws about when it comes to zoning. All right, so I'm gonna go, yep, why don't you come on up, and if there's other people in the room waiting in line, get ready.
Hi, I'm Josh. I'm new to Somerville. I'm also kind of new to zoning. So I just want to understand that with zoning generally, you're kind of just allowed to build by right, whatever is up to the code. So like, for example, where the dojo is right now, that's all 1 story right now. If want to, anyone could come and buy the property and build it up to 4 stories. Is that correct?
Correct.
So my question is basically like, that would increase the amount of square footage, for example, that's allowed in that whole, we'll call it Summer Nova area. So this.
They want more.
I guess kind of my point is like, there's already allowed to be more construction there. And the innovation district really just would determine what is really allowed to be there. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. Really just understand.
No, you nailed it, Josh. You're new to it, but you already got it. All right. Now I do want to hear more thoughts. I also I stopped sharing the screen already because folks at home wanted to be able to see all of us in here. But I am going to put those contact information back up there because there are lots of ways to stay in. This is not your last chance to even harass me about it. I think I had it up there earlier. I do office hours every Friday morning, have for the last 6 years and change. Now they're just from 8 to 9. You can come. I see some frequent flyers in this room, frequent guests to my front porch or to my office. Thank you for coming by. And they also are virtual, although I will warn you in advance. I don't always see the little pop up from Zoom saying you're waiting in the waiting room. So, but yeah, so I'm easy to find. There's also lots of opportunities for any of these as they start to go from being yeah, I'll get that one. As they start to move from these ideas and concepts into proposals, obviously there's tons of public engagement opportunities built into them by law. But Director Lewis also reminds me that planning@somervillema.gov is a master omnibus address that goes to the planning department. And if you put it in the title saying, about that innovation district, or don't go with hey knuckleheads. Let's go with something nicer. But yeah,
Thank you for that.
yeah, no, you guys aren't knuckleheads. Yeah, planning wants to hear from you, and I'm certainly not shy about reflecting. My entire job is reflecting your opinions and the needs of my constituents here in Ward 2. So let them know about it. Let me know about it, and please continue to stay engaged with folks like Art Stays Here, like the Union Square Neighborhood Council, because they are going to be, and the Ward 2 mailing list that Daniel runs, because they're going to give you more places to really get engaged, to put that activism into actually creating concrete policy change. So let's see. I see Martha's hand is up again. Hi, Martha. Can you see me?
Hi, sorry, I had this follow-up question. JT, can you talk a little bit about just the timeline? Because I'm still just trying to get my hands around. Is this going to be voted on in February, in May? Is there a comment period that we're in? Or because I feel like I get these meeting invites and I'm like, oh my God, we got to get our thing in before they vote on it next week. Like, is it not before a certain date? Can you just talk a little bit about that so I can not be so anxious?
Yeah, you got it. Let me get you to mute. All right, I'm just trying to cut it on feedback. Thanks. So for the stuff we heard about tonight, the changing the ACE creative economy definitions and uses, the creation of a new innovation district, that stuff is all still somewhere just north of a gleam in the eye of.
The ACE space changes are pretty quick.
Oh,
So
okay.
we can submit that.
Oh, okay. So what I'm hearing from Director Lewis is that the ACE, the creative economy use changes to tighten up FAB and be a little bit more protective of arts and creative uses, those are close to where they might submit them to the city council, which would then kick off the whole series of public hearings with the land use committee and the planning board. And that's where that comment period opens. Do you have a timeline on when you're thinking about submitting that?
Depending on how we all feel the conversation goes tonight, that could happen pretty soon, because those are protective changes that go in. The innovation is the gleam in somebody's proverbial eye.
Yeah. All right. So what I'm hearing is they might be coming forward with those protective ACE changes a little bit earlier. It could be any day now, but then it would still need to get advertised and have a whole public hearing process. I mean, I'm going to put in my pitch for I'd like to tighten it down a little bit more before we get to it. But then again, I'm on the city council, so I can just talk about it forever and try to tighten it up there. Let's see. And then for the other piece of it, the Summer Nova Rafi proposals, that's something that's before the city council's land use committee right now. I don't believe it's been scheduled for a public hearing, but that's
65 days.
yeah, it's any time in the next 2 months they might schedule a public hearing for that. It would have to get advertised. Of course, I'll send it out to my mailing list. I don't think there's any shortage of people in here who are going to email all their friends about it. So yeah, but you'll get a heads up, but we're not there yet. And I don't think none of this would get voted on anytime in the next few months. All right, Bill, why don't you come on up here so folks can hear you?
Yeah, I'm Bill Cavallini. I'm on the neighborhood council. I want to urge people to understand that there has been a zoning petition filed. And as soon as that's advertised in the newspaper, it has a 90-day life at the city council. During that time period, it cannot be modified to be more restrictive to the developer. So when you see unlimited height, you see 17 and 16 stories, that can't get less in that 90-day period unless the developer says, I will file an amendment to change it to that, to something less. So if you really want to influence the size and bulk of this development area, the innovation and arts and creative enterprise changes that the planning staff is proposing will have no effect if this goes into if this gets approved in that 90-day period. So Rafi Properties to be really negotiating with the Union Square Neighborhood Council and with you all as artists and friends of artists needs to withdraw their proposal and start anew.
All right. And thank you, Bill, for that about the details of what can change, what can be amended in a proposal. Y'all, this is a huge body of case law and it gets gnarly. I see Maya online, so let's go to her and then see if we're going to catch anybody else in the room. It's only 7:20, y'all, but we're not gonna be here till 9 or 10. All
Hi
right.
there, my name's Maya Honda and I live on Village Street and I've lived here for 25 years. Apropos of the last speaker and Councilor Scott's request for input, I want to say that I'm opposed to the overlay because once there's an overlay, there's no limit. As has been pointed out, you know, the hard work of the planning staff, if those proposals go forward, will be for naught if the overlay goes in. So just wanted to put myself out there about that. Thank you.
No, appreciate it. All right. Anybody else? Anybody else? Deborah Olin? She doesn't have her hand raised. Oh, Martha's back again. I'm sorry, sir. I forgot your name. What? Oh, I can't hear you. We're gonna unmute you.
It's Greg. That's okay.
Okay.
And I apologize for taking too much time. So it sounds like different from what you said before. The Summer Nova is in that 90-day period. It sounds like.
It's been delivered. It has been delivered. So it hasn't started its 90. Right. Right. So we haven't started that 90-day count.
Oh, we haven't yet. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Mute and then hit Greg. No, that's good. Oh, you changed the name to Greg? All right. I'm still calling Martha. All right. Well, hey, I can't thank you enough for coming out tonight to be part of this conversation, especially for being able to provide feedback. Anything as you mull it over, I know it's a lot. I've got these documents available online. If you see the link on the flyer that went to tinyurl.com/fabzoningnm1, that link sends you to a page on my jtforward2.com website that has a collection of the links to this Zoom. Once this is done with the recording, I'm going to be posting it online. I'll have a link on that page so you can watch the recording, forward it to your friends, neighbors, colleagues, and then also it's got a link there to a Google Drive where every one of these slides and every one of the source material that we're talking about here are linked to. So I just want to make sure that you've all got all the information at your fingertips. I know it's a lot to digest, but I have all the confidence in the world that as you do put your minds to it, you're going to think up smarter things than I certainly ever could on my own. And no disparagement of the planning department. I think there's just a lot of brilliance and talent here for people who are super passionate about their neighborhood. So as you digest those materials, please let us know. Give us the direction to move forward. Yes. One more.
So what happens
Wait. You got to come up here, man. We're not letting anybody off the hook. I want the folks at home to be able to hear you. You got it. Right.
Hey there, I'm Lee Kilpatrick from Washington Street Studios and Gallery over by Union Square.
Lee, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what happens next now with this. Will there be another meeting to discuss this again like this? Will it just go to like just into the city council, or you know what I mean?
Well, so
now that you've given us this,
Sure. Do you want to ask about the recent?
I don't know. Separately, we just got a notification. There was a request for a zoning change on our plot by our landlords to make it no longer FAB, but commercial industry, which is kind of not our favorite activity to be going.
No.
Yes.
So I saw that on the city council's agenda at our last meeting. So let me break that question down into a few different pieces. When it comes to the proposal, so in the building where Lee's got a studio, the owner of that building submitted a zoning amendment to remove their building from FAB and change it to some other designations. And that's their right. They have a legal right to propose a zoning change for any property they own. However, the fact that y'all are in this meeting right now is because I am perhaps fanatically dedicated to having the public input of my neighbors, the folks who are in those buildings, the folks who live nearby. Actually, on my website back in 2017, I wrote up a thing about why we have meetings like this and how broadly we advertise them and how much I really require more input from folks in the neighborhood. Because if 6 years of doing these meetings has taught me anything, it's that block by block, what people think is important, what people know about their neighborhood changes, right? 2 blocks, true story. Once upon a time, Somerville Ave, there was a development. There were 2 proposed developments, 2 blocks apart. And one of them, everybody who lived within a block and a half said, absolutely no parking in this development. Absolutely not. We don't need it. The neighborhood doesn't need it. And then 2 blocks down, they said, absolutely, we need at least 1 parking spot per unit in there. And that's why we have the meetings, just like that's why we play the games. So, so when it comes to a proposal that's from that developer, my stance on all of these things is if we have neighborhood meetings, we can talk about it. If it's just a proposal that comes in saying, this is what I want to do with my property and the neighborhood is not engaged, then by default, I'm not for it. So I'm hoping that this proposal brings the developer to the table, the owner to the table, which my experience with them in the last year and a half has been that they didn't want to talk. So
I agree. I've noticed that too.
you noticed that too.
Yeah.
All right. Shocking. All right. All snark aside. The question of what happens next with meetings like this, well, you know, it's probably going to end up with some conversations that I get to have with planning and zoning about what they heard tonight, what I heard tonight. I'm going to crank on that design services category and hopefully get that tightened up some before it comes to city council. But once it comes to city council, then it is a whole other set of meetings. Now, I like having these meetings early. So with this innovation district, hopefully they heard some stuff and say, okay, we're going to need to take that back to the drawing board. And then if they come back to me in 6 months and say, okay, we rethought it, we got a different set of ideas, you can bet your bippy that I'll be back here having another meeting to get everybody's input and probably get made fun of for using the phrase bet your bippy. But yeah, so that's what's next for those things. For the Summer Nova proposal, what's next is a public hearing and then that 90-day consideration period, and God only knows what twists and turns are ahead of them. So,
and the innovation district is tied to that or not tied to that?
No, totally different and from a totally different set of people.
Right.
And unfortunately, we have to talk about them all at the same time because
Right.
they're all happening at the same time. So, yeah. Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you, Lee.
Thanks.
So I'm sure that you have calendars, personal calendars with all of these things happening. Yeah. I think it would be great for me, and I think a lot of people would appreciate the transparency of knowing when important meetings are happening, when the next opportunity is for us to come and see what you've been working on, when there's deadlines that will affect what will happen and be implemented. I think that would be a great service you could provide to your community.
Well, I am paddling as hard as I can, like a duck under the surface, to provide as much as I can to the community. Y'all may not know this, but city councilor is a terrible job that does not pay well and does not come with any staff or resources. So I am doing the best I can. But that said, meetings like this one was advertised on the city calendar. So somervillema.gov/events. When I host neighborhood meetings, I try to get that posted up there. I want to thank the folks from PPZ who made sure that the flyer got posted at City Hall and it got in that events calendar. You know, folks like subscribing to my newsletter. I get it out. Not as often as I'd like to, but yeah, I'm working 3 jobs.
Art Stays here is gonna.
Art Stays Here also has a great newsletter that they've been keeping a lot of people informed. Daniel and Camille's Ward 2 newsletter is another good source. And the Neighborhood Council is kind of a central repository of a lot of that information. I know it doesn't mean there's a central place you can go to everything, but you can always come bug me Friday morning and ask me what's going on.
Maybe I will.
That sounds good.
All right.
Hey, if more people coming to my office hours, I'm excited. It's a good time. I think it's a good time. Tori Antonino. Come on in, Tori.
Hi, hi, everybody. I just want to say I found out about this through Danielle and Camille. So thanks. Just want to shout out to them and thank them for their effort at organizing and educating and reaching out. And I think I need to come see you because I missed the beginning of this meeting. But what I want to impart is that is about whether or not it's this zoning proposal, this being the Rafi overlay, whether it's this or something else, being able to extract benefits through zoning is a key way just to really get the letter of the law saying, for example, 20% of your arts and creative economy needs to be affordable. We need you to have 50% affordable housing if you do a housing development. I just want to say zoning, it can work in our favor. And I want to appreciate Bill Cavallini sort of doing a deep dive and helping us understand that perhaps this first proposal is not going to get us what we want. But I do think working through zoning can be a tool and is a tool that we should, remind ourselves to that it's there. And just thank you, everybody. And I think I will come bother you on Friday, JT.
All right, sounds good. And don't you worry about it because this meeting was recorded and I'll be putting it up as soon as I can. So I'll see you Friday. Is that not tomorrow? Okay, good. I got days. All right. Anybody else before we take off tonight? Otherwise, I'm going to try to throw up one more time that contact information for folks who might be watching at home. I'm going to remind you again that here we go. Pop that up. Share that screen, please. That back in the back there is the Art Stays Here contact information, and they are here to answer questions as well. So thank you all for your time tonight. I know it's hard to get out to these meetings, and I really appreciate that y'all cared enough to come. Keep talking at us. All right, thanks. Have a good